This is Vladimir Putin. If you don't know who that is, please pause this video, then spend a few minutes reflecting what's wrong in your life. Then once you've done that, apologize to your family for living under a rock. Then use the device you're watching this video on to Google who he is and then come back to watch the rest of this video. I'm kidding, guys. I think. Vladimir Putin has been in power in Russia for over 20 years, and a couple of weeks ago I made a video about how he came to power, maintained complete control, and how his authoritarian style of leadership contributed to many of Russia's economic problems. I've linked in here, and I recommend watching that first, as this one is the second part of that. Okay, so let's start. Russia as of February 23, 2024, no joking, is a rich country with a lot of natural resources, including significant deposits of rare earth elements, oil and natural gas, and a lot of other minerals used around the world. Russia has also stable buyers in both the West and the East for these natural resources. It has many global partners in various corners of the world, successfully interacts with different politicians, and effectively buys their loyalty and lobbies in its own interests through them. From a military point of view, Russia has confidently shown itself in the armed conflicts in which it has participated over the last 15 years. Its military has a huge budget and is commonly described by its own media as the second army of the world. But behind this facade of success, there are big problems. For example, out of 83 regions of the Russian Federation, 60 regions are subsidized and have to be provided from the state budget for more than 750 billion Russian rubles. For those who watched the first part, just remember how in 2000s Russia stopped continuing to make reforms and instead just subsidized everything with all the money it received from the sale of oil and gas. Whatever money was left after the oligarchs had stolen what they wanted. Can you see how an interesting situation may be developing? Russia is cursed by corruption. Large sales of oil and gas allowed super profits, and the power vertical that Putin creates work in such a way that his own people have the right to steal money and nothing will happen to them. Let me add one small example. This is an image. You can see how Russian law enforcement officers are gathering together countless bags and boxes filled with foreign currency. There are not rubles, only dollars, euros, pounds and Swiss francs. If you are a normal person, you would think this is some Pablo Escobar-style drug lord's stash, or perhaps the entire funding of Al-Qaeda. Because you are a normal person, you are in fact wrong. No, this is the stash of a regular colonel of the Moscow police. Here he is, our hero. He was arrested for bribery in 2016. In one of his 13 apartments, a stash of money was found, and the total asset of the colonel and his family amounted to more than $300 million, earned through bribes and managing streams of money. Of course, he did not do this alone, and it's entirely possible that he was the face of some group of high-ranking officers, but still, that's quite a lot of money for anyone, let alone someone who is supposed to be earning about $10,000 a year. Guys, if you're enjoying this so far, please remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Except you are a guy who didn't know who Vladimir Putin was, you don't like or subscribe, you go back to your rock and continue re-evaluating your life choices. Sorry guys, I got distracted. Let's get back to it. I could have easily mentioned oligarchs who steal billions of dollars. This is quite a usual thing, but I share the example of a police colonel specifically to open your imagination. Yes, you thought correctly, he is not the only one, because there are many such colonels in Russia. Now let me give you an example directly related to the Russian-Ukrainian war. Last year, when mobilization was announced in Russia, a scandal erupted over the winter uniforms, which exist on the paper but mysteriously disappeared from the warehouse. You will probably say, so what? Well, maybe something was stolen or lost. That can also happen. Do you know what I will tell you? Gone. 1.5 million sets of winter uniform. 1.5 million. Can you imagine? Of course, these 1.5 million sets of uniform were probably never made and the money was just stolen, but to assess the scale of corruption, this example is enough, because this cannot be implemented without involving a large number of people at all levels. In general, Russian corruption is as harsh and ruthless as Russian alcoholism, so maybe I will even record a separate video about it. If you're interested in such screw-ups, please tell me about this in comments and I will share more examples. And if you like what I do, consider supporting me through Patreon or buy me a coffee, as this allows me to continue making these videos for you. Okay, so you will probably be asking, why did I just speak about corruption in Russia? What does what have to do with this or anything? Relax, guys, I was just setting the scene. Now I will tell you the main story. On February 24, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, planning on quick victories, planning on the locals to greet the Russian army with bread, salt and flowers, expecting our soldiers to lay down their weapons and join Russia and a swift advance to Ukraine's western borders. Of course, this is not quite how it happened. Ukraine's first major victory was the deoccupation of the north of the country, when the Russians were forced to retreat to the territory of Belarus and Russia after failing to take Kiev. At the same time, it became apparently clear that the Russian military had major problems and they were not prepared to fight in a full-scale war format, especially not across thousands of kilometers of front line. What do you think a reasonable person would do in this situation? Well, I cannot speak for everyone, but I would ideally acknowledge the losses, withdraw the troops and start some kind of negotiation process. But as the 70-year-old bunker Führer, who once received documents in folders and clearly does not have access to the internet, and his immediate entourage are frankly terrified to tell him bad news, so the war continued and continues now. Let's now look at Russia in 2023. Huge military and material losses, unprecedented sanctions, the breaking of relations with the many countries of the world, a power crisis, the escape of a huge number of working-age people who know how to create business, capital outflow, budget deficit. Even if the war ends tomorrow, Russia has already gone back many years into the past, and this gap between the civilized world and Russia only grows. And all this thanks to one person. I guess his mother really should have loved him more. Personally, I don't really believe in a grassroots revolution when the Russian people themselves rise up against the current regime, because the repressive machine will work to the end and people are too frightened to express decisive protest. But I do believe in a small state coup related to the Russian top brass much more. Why so, you ask? The Russian political elite only lives and works in Russia, using their position for personal enrichment. All the money goes abroad to civilized countries. The children of Russian officials and even Putin's himself live and study in Europe and America. Interestingly, falling under sanctions and losing their fortune, are they interested in continuing the war? That was a rhetorical question. Therefore, it seems to me that Putin has a high chance of choking on water, or a large book will fall on his head. Of course, they will arrange a lavish funeral for him, but this war will end very quickly. The above described scenario is not very good for Ukraine and the world in general, because Russia will not become a democratic state and a new so-called Putin may come to power, who will just need time to recover the strength and means for a new war. But it's still better than Ukrainian soldiers and civilians dying. If you have watched up to this point, tell me in the comments what do you think will happen in the end. I'm very interested in your opinion, and thank you guys for watching. Slava Ukraini!